So there's no music? I'm muted.
Go ahead.
I don't know. Welcome. All right, let's go to work. I don't know what that was all about. I can't hear anybody. Oh, there, I hear some laughing. John Riossi, American banker. Let's start with you and get me off the screen as quickly as possible. M&A is the topic. Why is this important to SBA lenders?
I think SBA lenders, to any banker or credit union, because it's happening in the credit union world as well, is that number one, it potentially cuts down on the number of SBA lenders. So when you have, two and one goes away. So there's that, and I guess potentially on jobs and other things. The lender count in general goes down year after year after year. And I was just talking to a banker who was saying he doesn't know when the threshold is going to kick in, sort of the natural level. So the number of banks is now under 5,000. I think credit unions, they're declining too. Virgin just as good.
It was interesting. There was a call by SBA's Office of Capital Access the other day, and they said one of their concerns was institutions acquiring another institution, and then that transaction and then getting approved and making sure the new institution has all the files and has everything to service those loans properly. Lance, I know that's been an issue since day one. What quick advice do you have for lenders if they're involved in that process?
Well, I think that if you're the acquiring bank, you want to make sure you have someone skilled at reviewing a SBA loan file. I've had the pleasure of doing that for banks in the past where they were acquiring another bank and asked me to take a look at a sample of SBA loans to give an overall assessment of the quality of work. But the challenge you run into when you acquire a bank with an SBA portfolio, if it's not properly underwritten and closed and the file documentation's not there, when it comes time to present for guarantee purchase, you run into submissions because you don't have all the information. So in these acquisitions, they have to make sure the SBA portfolio is properly reviewed.
Yeah, and the acquiring institution is on the hook for those guarantees, right, Lance?
Absolutely. Whoever acquires, there's no doubt about it. And there are some challenges that you run into, especially if you've got a lender that's done a lot of PLP loans and maybe not done them properly, closed them properly, serviced them properly, and the acquiring institution gets it, they are on the hook.
I've heard stories of they can't find the file and they just simply submit a PDK saying, we don't have it. What's SBA going to react to that? How are they going to react?
I've worked on projects like that, Bob, and it takes kind of I talked to a good friend of mine, Hollis Carter, who was the 504 liquidation director at Little Rock when I was deputy director, and we were talking about that. You have to have someone very skilled at rebuilding things. There's some things you can't replace, but there's a lot of documentation that you can recreate for the SBA.
Yeah, you could pass tax returns and do that. Hey, guys, I hear an open mic, and it's just really annoying. You guys can solve that. But we have a poll question, number one. Have you been involved in acquiring another institution's SBA loan portfolio? John Riosty, what do you think the answer is going to be on this one?
I think given the amount of M&A that has just been taking place in the industry forever, it's going to be significant. And I am wrong.
Oh, well, about half. No, I don't think you're wrong. It's about half and half.
I would have guessed over half.
More than that, yeah. So
John,
go ahead, Lance.
I have a question for you, John. In the last recession, there was discussion of too big to fail. And they instituted regulations that created even bigger banks.
Yes.
So it's kind of interesting. We had the concept of too big to fail, and they wanted to avoid that, but they put regulation into place. Now we have even larger financial institutions and more of them.
Right. No, and part of that also was sort of I can't remember exactly how long it was, but a 7 or 8 year moratorium on new banks.
Right. Right. How many new banks are there going to be this year, John? Any idea?
This year, there's quite a bit of, well, relatively speaking, there's quite a bit of activity. It's not like the levels that St. has,
Right.
but I would say that it's at least 10 are in some state of the process.
De novo and processing. Great. Yeah. That I think that's interesting. So, John, let's bring up this slide, and these are why are you focusing on this right now? I mean, your job is community bank editor, and why are you covering this?
Well, it's happening. Last week was just, I think, an unusually busy week, because they don't distribute evenly. I mean, this week hasn't been as busy, but although there was a deal. And Lance and I were talking about this involving Simmons First, where it bought 2 small banks in Tennessee over the weekend, or it announced it Monday. But just as we said, it really affects all aspects of the financial institution industry, because it's, while I focus on banks, it's happening in credit unions as well. There's significant consolidation there, and there's some consolidation of banks by credit unions. So there's a lot going on. And,
John, is there a focus on the smaller institutions, the regional, the Wall Street institutions? I assume this is at the smaller level that they're being
I
acquired.
think smaller and regional level. I think some of the, you'll see that First Midwest in Chicago was a fairly significant size bank. That $2.5 billion is the purchase price.
Right.
So First Midwest is...
That gets to be all of a sudden now we're talking real money, right?
Yeah.
Is SBA scheduling on-site reviews? Lance, I'm going to throw this one at you.
Well, I thought they had paused on-site reviews, but it appears that somebody's gotten a request for on-site review. I think that they certainly are going to start scheduling more on-site reviews as we come out of PPP and forgiveness and, out of the pandemic. You're going to expect to see more on-site reviews. But I can tell you, Bob, in 2020, there were a very limited number of on-site reviews, if any.
Yeah, I think the answer is I don't believe they're scheduling them yet. I believe the people probably said, yes, got a bill for it, so they're assuming it's going to happen. But SBA is very much doing what they call the desk reviews. They're doing their data analytics. Katie, with what you're reading, I haven't heard anything about coming up with on-site reviews. Have you? Just it's all desk reviews?
No, I know they probably plan on doing some more, but I haven't heard specifically when they're going to start focusing on the on-site.
And our last poll question is, have SBA business default rates recovered in late 2020? Uh, 47, 19, 34. Why are we asking this question, Katie?
And so we're kind of looking at data that recently came out from the Office of Advocacy, and looking at defaults. That is something important to look at, because a lot of people are comparing this to the Great Recession and what was going on there, and we're not nearly the numbers we saw back then. We did see a bit of a spike in 2020, but that did level out toward the later half of 2020. So we are more on a level plane now, but it certainly is still elevated.
By the way, Katie's going to go through some of these slides. if you get a chance, go through that Office of Advocacy website. A lot of great material, a lot of great support. It expands also out of SBA. It addresses all of small business issues. So if you ever need some stats or whatever, it's pretty good. What else? What else was in the bulletin?
Yeah, so this particular page we've got up here is looking at establishment openings and closures. And obviously 2020 was a unusual year, and you can definitely see that spike there with the closures. A lot of things are back opening, and we're above those levels that we were previously. So that hopefully that's going to transition into more jobs and things like that. But that also is a concern. You've got a lot of openings for jobs now with all these businesses either reopening or new businesses starting needing employees. And that's now going to be the big issue going throughout 2021 is how do we get employees?
John, I would have definitely said I agree with the closures. I would have expected that spike. I would not have come close to openings. They're doing pretty well. So that's a shock to me.
Right, but I guess the closure issue is a good one because some of those facilities had to have had loans.
Right.
And so,
yeah, and that's the Lance Sexton Full-Time Employment Act.
I think that we're going to probably see some more defaults in the very near future, Bob, because I've had a couple of phone conversations with borrowers who had had 8 CARES Act payments, had a deferment, got a couple of PPP loans. They've been living on not having to make their payments. Not everybody. A lot of small businesses are in great shape, but there are businesses that what's kept them open is government support, and that's ending now. So we're going to find out who the real winners are in this process now that the payments have halted, and now that PPP is over. We'll see a few defaults come out of it in the near future.
Lance, you did a great job yesterday on the webinar on what happens when the loan goes 31 days past due. Real quick, I don't want the entire 75 minutes. I want 30 seconds. Elevator. What were the 2 main takeaways that you were trying to leave with your?
Well, I think that you have to understand servicing actions that you can take with a borrower that is past due to keep them performing on their loan. Probably one of the best is the workout plan, Bob, and understanding how to implement a workout plan. And I just want to emphasize to everybody, the SOP states in several places that our job as participant lenders in servicing an SBA loan is to find a way for the small business to pay the loan back.
Work it out, yeah, as opposed to litigation.
Anybody that Bob has worked in liquidation knows that you're a lot better off getting paid back than you are going through liquidation.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your next slide that you have, Katie?
And so this next one is looking at job creation, which just kind of goes with what I was just talking about with all those openings. Job creation for those small businesses is growing pretty significantly right now, and we're above pre-pandemic levels on that. And like I said, the problem here is there's a lot of job creations, a lot of jobs available, not a lot of people to take those jobs. So that is the struggle a lot of small businesses are trying to deal with right now, is trying to maintain employees, entice employees to come back. And employ businesses that are brand new businesses that didn't have employees before. So that's definitely a concern that's going to be continuing throughout this year.
I am absolutely shocked. I would not have come, if I had to draw that graph and look at what happened during the Great Recession and look what happened last year. I'm shocked by that. I didn't realize it was that much of a significance difference.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. I didn't even notice that before you had just mentioned that, but you're right. Looking at other statistics, things like defaults and things like that, this pandemic seems like it probably didn't affect things as much, but in this particular situation, it did affect job creation, definitely.
Well, and obviously, John, the cushion of government intervention directly to the employee and to the businesses definitely cushioned the blow. I mean, there was still a lot of people who got hurt, but that's an interesting chart. Thank you for bringing that up, Katie.
Well, Bob, Great Recession back in 08, 09 was kind of real estate fueled because real estate values were inflated and real estate lending practices got lax, to say the least. One thing a friend of mine and I were talking about yesterday was the elevated cost to build a building, because and are we going to end up with elevated prices, and will they adjust downward at some point in the future, and how does that affect the property values, loans, liquidation of loans? So I mean, it's certainly something to think about. Yeah, and the majority of the people on this call have gone through a period of inflationary inflation, and it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant. So we'll see what happens. Hey, I got a quick question here from Jim. For Lance, do you think SBA will have leniency regarding the life insurance requirements for borrowers who have the disease that are having difficulty getting a policy? Great question, Jim. What do we do, Lance? They have COVID. They had COVID, and now they're having difficulty getting life insurance. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I think the COVID concern would go away after they recovered, because I just bought life policies, and as you know, I had COVID in March. But I think it certainly is a challenge. SBA on life insurance, you have to make an attempt to get it. Yes. If it's cost prohibitive, if it's going to have a negative impact on the cash flow of the small business guarantor and the borrower, you can, well, if you do the loan POP, you can waive it unilaterally based on a servicing memorandum that states, you know, John applied for life insurance and it was $8,000 a month. Thus, we think it's appropriate to waive that requirement. It needs to be, I mean, the cost needs to be excessive. Even if you do a GP loan, SBA is very good when it's cost prohibitive, or if they can't get insurance at all. They can't get insurance, yeah. And just so SBA, you know, you can do a loan authorization change request to Citrus Heights if you have a GP loan. You can waive it on a PLP loan as long as it's reasonable. Katie, why don't you conclude with quarterly business bankruptcies, and we'll hold these other slides over for another day. What's happening with bankruptcies? Yeah, so this is kind of surprising, but also not too surprising. I don't know. It depends how you look at it. But bankruptcies are still pretty low. You didn't see a huge spike due to COVID like, you know, you're seeing there in 2008. Actually, earlier than that, you even get a spike there. It's still pretty low. However, with PPP ending and with those 11-12 payments ending and things like that, you might see a bit more of a spike. This is only to mid-2020, so. I'm Lynn. No, there will be a spike. Go ahead, Lynn. Just like when we predicted last year when they were going to restart PPP, and, you know, we threw a date out there, or I'm sorry, what we were talking about forgiveness, weren't we? And we predicted when they would get guidance out, and then it took about 2 months longer than we thought. I was only off by 3 months. I think. Come on. Very good. Program update. I think you'll like it. We're tinkering with our Fridays. We think we're going to be more Fraud Friday oriented. Tell a little bit more stories on that and what's happening. John, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. I appreciate it. I love your work. Please follow him on American Banker and see what he's writing about. Great job. Katie, as always, thank you. Lance, as always. We'll talk to you all tomorrow, and thank you for joining us today
For Call Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time. Do we have music? Do we dare have music? Let's see. Let's see. Go ahead.
Have a
Music.
great day.
No music. Well, we're still working everything out. Somewhere we have music.